Well, today I am joined by a dear friend, Drue Kataoka. She is an incredible artist and technologist, and her work lives at the intersection of AI, creativity, and also neuroscience. She is the CEO of Drue Kataoka Art Studios, and her projects have actually reached 5 continents and even launched into space. Drue is pushing the boundaries of what's possible, from the collaborations with us, with brainwave driven art, to immersive collaborations with industrial light and magic. And we are very excited to be partnering with Drue on an exciting BCI game that blends art, AI, neurotech, and philosophy. And I can't wait for Drue and I to talk more about it. So, Drue, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Ton. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
So let's start with the intersection of what both you and I know, the intersection of art and neuroscience. So, how did you first become interested in BCIs or brain computer interfaces, and how has that shaped your own creative practice?
Well, my studio is focused on technology, currently a lot of visual generative AI, but really technology and science in so many different forms, from virtual reality, augmented reality, NFTs, deep science collaborations like art I sent into space for the first zero gravity art exhibit at the International Space Station. Actually, two artworks that we sent into space. BCI is a fascinating part of technology for us. Personally, I love it because it's like a direct connection to the source of human creativity, which is the brain. And, one thing that I've talked with you about over the years that fascinates me is that ultimately all art is brainwaves that gets materialized, whether that's physically or digitally.
Yes, it starts somewhere, right? Someone's imagination, and then someone's directing the artwork and willing it into existence. And it all kind of starts here.
It starts there and ultimately then gets materialized in some form. Absolutely. So I have been following BCI for years with fascination. But the first formal project that my studio did in that area was with Emotive, and that was in 2013 that you and I debuted the Tree of Pascal main stage at Davos at the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum to people from nearly every country in the world. Should I explain a little bit about what that piece
Yeah,
was?
absolutely. Because that project was really special. Was we collected brainwaves from so many people from so many walks of life, thanks to the wonderful people that we got to meet and interact with through the World Economic Forum and the young global leaders. So yeah, let's walk through that process because that was a pretty fun collaboration.
That was a fun collaboration. You and I got to meet when we did a special program at the Harvard Kennedy School, and we had these breakout sessions, and we started having these great conversations about art and neurotech and how could we do something that had not never been done before. So the first step was actually doing that collection of the brainwaves, which took place over the course of a year, and I think we covered making sure that we had brainwaves from people in nearly every country of the world, which was no small feat. So we did collections all over the globe over the course of a year. But the concept of the work, so the name of the piece was the Tree of Pascal. And I always say, you can think of this artwork as a collaboration among 100+ brains from all over the world, all collaborating to keep one small tree alive, because there's a tree housed inside the installation, and it's covered in electrochromic glass that's driven by the brain waves that we collected. So it's an artwork, but it's also, I say, it's like a digitally enabled ecosystem, and we were leveraging um, EEG, electrochromic glass, digital signal processing, but also were inspired by Blaise Pascal and his very haunting words about man being very feeble, but being feeble like a reed, but being a thinking reed, and that being the thing that distinguished him. So that was the first project we did, and I think it was quite groundbreaking, given that was
Yeah,
2013
to
that we
think
did.
that was 12 years ago,
Mhm.
right? That's a long time to already be exploring this intersection between neuroscience and art. So, Drew, you've created art that responds to brainwaves, it uses AI, and even explores time dilation. What draws you to this merging of art and emerging technology? I mean, you've been doing this consistently, and I've watched you over the 12 years that I've known you. You've always been drawn to this emergent technology, and how does it intersect with your field of art and creativity? So, I'd love to unpack that a little bit with you.
Well, Ton, I've told you this before many times, but I have a mantra, and that is that art is technology and technology is art. And it was the basic thesis of our studio when we started from scratch 20 years ago, and still believe it ever more strongly today. I feel that art and technology are on a continuum. And if you sit back and think, when you see art form become incredibly sophisticated and mature, you can say that is a technology. And conversely, when you see a technology reach the apex of its being, when it's super sophisticated, people will say, "Oh, that's an art form." You know, that technologist has made that into an art form. So I see them as a kind of continuum. But it's funny because I remember years ago, I was on a panel with a number of people in the art world, including a very famous gallerist, Jeffrey Deitch. And I said that. I remember him being like taken aback and just shocked by that statement. So I think it's evident to people like you and me, but um, I think now also as time passes, time has also proven us right. So, you know, when I was in high school and I was deciding where I would go to university, I chose to go to Stanford, but that was totally against the grain and totally against all the recommendations of my artistic mentors at that time, Jean-Pierre Rampal, Wynton Marsalis. All of them were like, "Why aren't you going to New York? Why aren't you going to Paris? What are you going to do in Palo Alto?" Um, and I said then, you know, I feel that Silicon Valley is the cultural epicenter of the world. It's like the new Florence. It's not just a tech hub. It's the cultural epicenter of the world. And, you know, the other thing that I like to be inspired by and reflect on a lot is that the biggest geniuses in history have been holistic geniuses. So Leonardo da Vinci, maybe he was one of the best 2 or 3 artists in the history of all time, but he was also, one of the greatest scientists and engineers and anatomists, and Einstein and Feynman both have very well documented deep bodies of work, in music and art, deep avocations, not just as passing hobbies, and also being things that really influenced them. So one last thing that I wanted to share about Leonardo da Vinci. So he pushed the bounds of science, you know, not just art, but science, anatomy. He was at late nights in the morgue taking these bodies apart so he could understand the sinews and the connections, so he could think about them, so he could paint these figures. And so, you know, people are aware that the anatomy work that he did influence his art. But I think less are aware that the reverse is also true, that his artistic practice, his sculpting, his drawing, his engineering skill, like all those artistic skills, they actually influenced his anatomical studies and his scientific work. So he did this groundbreaking experiment about the brain, which I was thinking about for this conversation. I think it's a very appropriate for this conversation and very inspiring. He mapped the cerebral ventricles by injecting hot wax into the cavities of an ox head
Wow.
to create this three-dimensional solid cast. And it was just an ingenious use of the art technique. That's a sculptural technique. And then he brought that over to this anatomical study, and that allowed him to visualize the ventricles size and shape with a clarity that had never been achieved before. I mean, it wasn't just that he was the first person that was looking at it. No one had seen it. So, I mean, it was really interesting. Yes, the anatomical work, the engineering work, his mathematical work, that informed his art, but then also his sculptural practice, his drawings, his spatial thinking, his art, all of those techniques and that body of work influenced how he uh, did his scientific work then also enable him to push those fields in ways that hadn't been pushed before.
That's amazing. So that interdisciplinary practice actually really truly elevated his understanding of both. It's incredible. Yeah, it's a great reminder of why thinking outside and thinking laterally instead of being so narrow and focused, while being an expert is so important. Having that the benefit of an adjacent field can be so enriching. I think it's quite interesting because when we think about the brain as the controller or the brush or the input, like in the tree of Pascal, it was really influencing the electrochromic glass. And so, if your brain waves were focused and uh, uh, in synchrony, it would actually clear up the glass and the photosynthesis would happen and the tree would thrive. But if you were all muddled and cloudy and scattered, the glass remained really cloudy, and so that kind of deprived the tree of the sunlight that it needed. And so that was a really interesting metaphor. And how does that change when we actually think of the brain as this input? How does that define and how does that change how we define creativity for you?
I think it like, doesn't change it. I think that creativity is the same. I think it's the purest expression that's very deep within each of us and is part of our existential meaning. You know, Ton, humans started painting on cave walls in Lascaux over 30,000 years ago. We still don't understand exactly what they were doing or what it meant to them or what motivated them to do that. They left these beautiful gestures that were in response to the shapes and the curvature of the cave walls. But we do know that art is deeply human and it gives meaning to our lives. By the way, I also like to say that art is the best technology that we have yet developed as human beings to cross, su- to traverse super long timescales. I think BCI doesn't fundamentally change how we define creativity, to answer your question, but I think it is amazing because it provides a super highway to human creativity. And the possibilities that are going to come out of that are going to be amazing. And Tan, you've been such a pioneer in this space so early. You saw the potential long before it was trendy or long before it was easy to see what would be happening. But it's very exciting what's on the horizon.
So when we think that this new interface is going to be a lot more prolific and a lot more ubiquitous, what responsibilities do we have as creators? Right, we talk a lot about the responsibility of the innovator, the creator, the person that has this opportunity, this unique opportunity. And now that the technology is making itself more readily available, how do you think that's going to, shape how this technology will be used by more and more people?
That's a hard question and it's so important. I mean, any type of technology should be used responsibly. But now, when we're talking about tapping into people's deepest thoughts and emotions through reading their brainwaves, so to speak, that adds some additional levels of privacy and security concerns. And history has shown us that we didn't do particularly well with the first wave of the internet and mobile applications and so forth. So, I mean, I'm disturbed at how routine it is that we just don't even blink an eye when we get a notification that our account has been hacked and our social security number is out there and all of this personal information and that account information. I mean, all of us have been hacked many, many times over and we just can't even stop to think about it anymore. We certainly, as we enter this new era, which you've been a leader in, Ton, we certainly can't let that happen with the innermost recesses of our mind.
One of the concepts that you've talked about, which I really love, is this concept of immortality, right? And when we think about our brainwaves as being an expression of ourselves, as we are going through life today, right? It's our experiences shape the brain's connectivity, and the patterns that emerge. And every day as we go through life, it changes based on the experiences that we have. You've been exploring this concept of immortality for some time and art as a way to elevate us and to take us through a longer journey through time, long after we're gone. Some of these cave huts, as you alluded to, has existed for thousands, tens of thousands of years, long after the first those artists actually left those marks behind for us. So when you think about something that's transient like human life and the brain as one way that we can use um, as an interface or a control and a brush, right, to create something in this moment, how do we think about that connection to us? Like, is there something that kind of um, makes you ponder about the uniqueness of using brainwaves as an input that might allow us to you tap into a part of ourselves that maybe we aren't really consciously thinking about all the time.
I mean, it's an incredibly unique input, and it's building on the layers and layers, all these beautiful cultural layers that you and I are talking over all of the different human epochs and eras. You're right. I have reflected a lot on this idea of art and creating art for immortality. I say that's the North Star of Drue Kataoka Studios, which it's a big, you know, ambition. It's a high bar, but when we think about things in that kind of time frame, it pushes us to think beyond ourselves. I think that so many of the things in our culture around us are permeated and suffused with such kind of short-term thinking. So when you think about how do you create something that's going to last for 10 years, for 100 years, for 1,000 years, for 10,000 years, what does that mean to create something that's timeless and that will endure? And in the previous centuries, humans asked themselves this question a lot, and you had to think about how will humans receive a work that is completely outside of their own cultural contemporary mindset or context. And now what's really mind-blowing is we have to say it's not just a human audience that will receive these works in the future. It will be an audience of AI and humans, or maybe only AI. So, so I think that means that the cerebral nature, the intellectually complex nature of the works that we create had better be quite significant in order to last, because we'll be in a very interesting period at that point.
So, what role do you think brain data can play in helping people connect more deeply with themselves?
Ooh. Well, we still don't understand. And you and I have texted and chatted about this a lot over the years, but we don't understand the boundaries between the conscious and the unconscious. And it's been a subject of fascination for a long, long time. Most recently, notably, the surrealists did incredible work with automatic writing and creation and exploring all these different archetypes of the unconscious brain. But brain data, especially with the vision that you and the emotive team have with it, I think it can just be this huge unlock for creative possibilities and for creative expression. I mean, it's like we can only start to imagine what these possibilities are going to be with BCI enabled creativity. And I can't overstate how excited I am about what you're doing. I think combining BCI with AI, with VR, with AR, it will literally be mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, as we think about this question, I think it's quite interesting. It makes me reflect on the work that we did a long time ago, looking into autistic savants. And when we think about autism as a condition, we often think that these are children that have trouble learning in the conventional sense, but yet autistic savants can draw with exquisite detail a scene that they have only seen just once. Very much like tracing, where I cannot draw, Drew. Unlike you, I'm terrible as an artist, but I can definitely trace. And when these children who are autistic savants, when they start to draw, they draw with such exquisite detail as if they're tracing a scene, like they are seeing it. When you ask them, they just say, I can see it. I just see, I'm just drawing what I see. And so I find it really quite incredible that if it's not a learned trait, um, it makes you wonder whether there is an innate genius inside all of us that has this capacity that we don't know how to tap into, right? If it's innate, if it's not learned, then it must be innate in somewhere. If we're able to do it in the same way that I can trace something, and maybe in my mind's eye, if I can see it, it's always been a deep fascination of mine to see if one day we might be able to unlock the inner genius in all of us. So is fascinating. And whether that's a subconscious part of our brain that we're able to access, um, who knows, right? Maybe this conscious mind that we have, that we, used and cultivate through learning, somewhat somehow suppresses this subconscious knowledge that we somehow innately have and can tune into. Who knows? We are a long way from discovering and really unpacking a lot of that knowledge, but definitely a very fascinating area to explore. We are collaborating again, 12, 13 years later, on a BCI game that blends art and AI and neuroscience and philosophy. And you and I, we talk a lot about, what does it mean to think about some of these concepts deeply, and what ideas do we want to challenge the viewer with, right? And so, without giving too much away, what excites you about the most about this project?
Well, it's been a huge pleasure working together. It's just like having fun, just playing with all the pieces when you and I get in our creative mode. So I've had a lot of fun. My team has had a lot of fun working with your team and with you. And it is a stealth project right now, but I am very excited about what we're doing. I think it's very pioneering for 2025. Again, we're pushing the boundaries. We're combining art, AI, and BCI in a totally new way. It's it's a quite profound artwork. I don't want to reduce it to an explanation. I think it really ultimately has to be experienced because it's a personal journey of discovery, and it really deals with, understanding our lives and finding meaning. And also, I think we're reflecting on the creative process in all of its forms, whether that's art or coding or music or literature or philosophy, as this kind of sublime form of human existence. So I'm really excited about it. I mean, I think another thing that you and I have spoken about a lot that inspires us or that kind of drives us is reflecting on this idea of asking questions through the work about our role and responsibility as creators in the age of an AI empowered world. Creativity, agency, meaning. Like what do all these things mean, and how can we just open up all those different open up new portals to all those parts of the conversation in a way that hasn't been done so far, in a way that only art can.
And the purpose is not to really give any answers, because we're not in a position to provide an answer, but really it's about, I guess, getting people to really reflect on some of these questions, and giving people a vehicle for them to experience through a piece of art that allows them to really start to challenge themselves to think more deeply about the going through this new world that we're experiencing, and this accelerated pace of change driven so much by AI.
Yes, and that's, by the way, my definition of great art is that it asks questions, and it uh, it doesn't necessarily answer those questions. And I think if a work has a high degree of substance in it, those questions are going to kind of keep getting regenerated in you in different forms and keep kind of approaching you from different angles and really making you look at the whole subject in a very different way.
So, looking ahead, how do you imagine neurotechnology and creative expression will evolve together, let's say in the next 5 years, and then say 10 years, if we can even imagine that far ahead?
That's a big question, Ton. And I mean, I think if we think of the human brain as the source of all, you know, human creativity, and we are trying to convey that creativity into a digital or or a physical manifestation, I think of BCI as the superhighway that allows the two to connect. So I was thinking about this the other day. You know, on a computer, you have the bus, which is the binary unit system, and that's the communication link that transfers the data and the power and the other signals between all the different computing components. So it's very important for speed, for performance, for complexity, for the quality of the output. And I think you could say, well, that's what BCI is for the creative process. So it's like the next generation bus that will enable a qualitatively new form of artistic expression that we can't even fully understand. And given the challenges and complexities of building in VR and AR and AI empowered VR and all of these things, which by the way is about creating whole universes on the fly, being able to cut that latency and increase the throughput will be essential. So it's very clear that BCI will be a huge unlock for this. And I think your role, Tan, is someone who's been there in the early days of the field, and the experience and the vision and the passion and the love that you bring to this field is so important. So I'm very excited, and we'll keep dialoguing on it as the years pass.
Well, Drew, thank you so much for this conversation. Your work continues to really stretch what's possible at the edge of art, technology, and the human mind. I'm super excited for what we're actually building together, and I know that this project is just a continuation of some really exciting work that we've pioneered almost over a decade ago already. It's very exciting. I'm excited to see what people think.